Hello, climbers, and welcome to Season 3 of Climbing Mount CMMC. Hello, climbers, and welcome back to another episode of Climbing Mount CMMC. My name is Kaleigh Floyd, and this is Guerra, and we are the hosts, and we are also part of an organization called Axiom, which is an MSP that is CMMC Level 2 certified. Now, today we are going to be gearing up towards a conversation for MSPs specifically, and we're going to be talking about scalability of CMMC. Now, this is probably the most difficult part of CMMC if you are an external service provider or an MSP going through this, because it's not just doing it for one organization, it is doing it for multiple and being able to scale your services to multiple different companies. So this is something we are super passionate about here. I know Bobby loves to talk about this, and I'm excited to discuss this topic with you guys. Bobby, do you want to have your thoughts about this before I ask you the specific first question?
Yeah, it takes me back to when we got our level 2. Everybody told me, like, oh man, congratulations. You know, when we made the announcement to the team, everybody's like, you're going to sleep so much better tonight. And I think I've said it several times on the podcast and to you several times. Like that night, I woke up at like 3 or 4 in the morning, and I just went out on the couch and just looked at a television that wasn't on and just stared at it for like 2 or 3 hours, thinking to myself, like, how are we going to do this at scale now? Like, getting our level 2 ourselves helps validate our system and what we're doing. But really, it was the starting blocks. It's us getting in there at the beginning of doing the journey of doing a system that's going to scale and work with them. And we had to think about that, right? So we went through and got our level 2 with the assumption that everything that we believed about how we were going to scale it out is going to be true, but now we're going to have to start doing it, right? And then were we right? Were we right with some of the assumptions and some of the things? And spoiler alert, some of them were wrong that we made as far as an assumption wise, and we had to pivot. But I would have to say we provided a lot of grace in our policies and processes about how we did it so that we can appropriately adjust as we move forward. But you really need to think about that scale factor as an MSP, because that's a big deal for us, right? We typically accomplish that a lot by our tools, the tools that we use that allow us to be a force multiplier. But when you come in the CMMC space, tools can be such a double-edged sword because of the fact that they can do things that may not be authorized. People from those vendors may have access to information they should not have access to because it's a controlled environment.
Yeah. So you talked about preparation and things that you prepared before servicing clients. What were some of those things that you did before? So what are some examples of those things?
Yeah, so for us, what we thought to ourselves is, how are we going to create a system that we can support our clients out of? So we thought to ourselves, we obviously cannot support our clients with our current environment that we have. So we're gonna have to stand something up differently. So we went ahead and said to ourselves, if we're going to do this at scale, we're going to have to do it from an environment that would make things much more friendly to an auditor, because we can't be the problem for the client. We always have to be the solution. So that's part of the reason why we created that second container that we swivel seat into for us to support our clients out of. And that container got all the tools and everything that we go to use is all in there. And that's what got level 2 certified. So I think, in my opinion, that's probably the right way to do it. There are MSPs like Sentinel Blue and Andy and his team over there, great guys and gals, but they don't swivel seat because of the fact that they're pure play CMMC based and working on the DoD. So they built their whole container around absolute compliance because that's how they had to roll. But we didn't, because we have commercial clients and we have CMMC based clients. Also, some of our clients have a smaller scale, but then they still have a good chunk of their business that's just out of scope, and they want us to provide support at a less cost. And so because of that, we kind of see this bifurcation, and we didn't foresee us like divorcing ourselves of commercial entirely. So we wanted to be able to have the ability to support both. And this affords us that capability to do that.
Yeah. So you talked about, I love how you say you don't want to be the problem, but you want to always be the solution. And one thing that you highlighted is tools. For an MSP, that is, a critical part. What would you say was the most difficult part when thinking about scaling the business and not being allowed necessarily to use the tools that make it easier. At this moment, you can't use
Right.
some of those tools, right?
Yeah, it's nigh impossible to have an RMM tool
Yeah.
that would pass an audit because of the fact that RMM tool gives the remote management control of the entire system, because that's remote management, that's like part of the name of it. And those organizations have the ability to come in and control those systems, right? So that means that if you're using Kaseya or ConnectWise or whatever, and they have an RMM tool and they use third-party organizations outside the United States, if you're putting that RMM tool in an ITAR environment, then they're not going to be compliant. And there's data sovereignty and access. There's all kinds of things that gets really super messy. So for us, if that organization wasn't FedRamped with their RMM tool, or then we just weren't going to use them, and that pretty much eliminated everybody.
Yeah.
So we just said, you know what, we're just going to do a Microsoft play here. And so we had to sit down and think how we were going to do this at scale and only stay in the Microsoft suite. And we thought, yeah, we could do that. And as we went down the path, we're like, okay, we can't do that. Like there's just some stuff you can't do. So that's why we had to get some additional tools, and we self-hosted those so that they would be part of the audit, because we didn't want to create a FedRAMP environment and like become a CSP or something. So we self-hosted those specific tools. And some people were like, wait a minute, if you self-host, that means you're a CSP. No, that's not what that means. That's a conversation for a different day. Some people may object to that concept, but in general, most auditors kind of draw the line. Where you would say that you're a cloud service provider is if you have like auto provisioning and you can just put your credit card down and scale up to whatever you want, like Microsoft or Google. That's how that works. That's how they sort of draw that line, For us, we don't auto provision. We don't do any of that kind of stuff. Like it's all like relational one-to-one with everybody we're working with.
Right. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the different types of pieces that go into CMMC and how you can scale that. Nobody can do all of them, right? So it takes multiple departments in your company to prepare for scalability. Can you describe a little bit more what that means for the different departments?
If you said, okay, how many people on the planet could do everything for a CMMC implementation? And what do I mean by that? I mean, like this person could walk in, they fully understand all the compliance requirements. They understand all the relevant technologies like Azure, Microsoft, DLP, Purview, Intune, switches, firewalls. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. The more stuff you pile on, the smaller amount of people that walk this earth that can do that. And so it's just not realistic that you have a fleet of those people that can just, I'm going to give you this one client and you go take care of everything and then call me when you're done. That doesn't work. So you're going to have specific departments and areas. You might have a GRC team. You might have a project team. You might have a support team. Like you've got to think in your head, how are all these teams going to work together and accomplish the difficult goal of making sure the client gets compliant, right? So you have an onboarding team and you grab all the assets. Okay, so then you're going to kick that to the GRC group that's going to look at it and go, okay, all of these are in scope and these are out of scope, and you asset tag all these and then kick it back to the project team who's now going to move those things into the right VLANs to keep them separated if you have those kind of requirements. Like as you can kind of see, like the forks just keep adding up, right? The decisions and choices. Yeah. So you've got to sit down in your organization and think about all of those types of things and start building good, repetitive, consistent processes that help the client go through that. So you've got to come in and support the client, and from start of onboarding through their getting ready journey, through getting compliant, through continued maintenance and support, and then see you in 3 years. Let's do it all over again.
So I would even emphasize too, like it changed us on the sales and marketing side even as well, because when you're scaling, you can't do everything. Not everything is customizable. That's the point of scaling. Right. You kind of got to pick a lane and you got to do it well, or you're just going to suck at a lot of different options, What
I was talking more is about the operational side of moving a client through it. But then you have like what you're saying, the sales and solution side. Like you've got to have the templated processes and knowing more where you're going to draw the line, because you can't be a custom builder for everybody, right? Oh, just tell us what you want and we'll bring it in. Your support team is just going to murder you.
Yeah, your support team is going to leave.
Right. I mean, most MSPs are going to be almost like a home builder. They might have 5 or 6 different acceptable scenarios that they can support, kind of those avatars. And you tell the client, all right, which of these buckets do you fall in? Because these are the ones that we can support. If you are not in those, we cannot help you.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to be willing to walk away from the clients because you've defined the areas that you are qualified, you have the mature processes to support them. If you don't, and you just go in there and say, let's just do whatever, it's compliant, so therefore it's okay, but it's not manageable from a support perspective, they're just going to fail the audit because your team isn't going to be able to effectively manage that.
Yeah.
And you're just setting them up for you to fail them.
So true.
Which is, I think, worse than just telling them no.
Yes,
right? I can't
agree.
do that.
Yeah. And we're going to talk, I'm going to be recording another podcast episode talking specifically on like that side of an organization and working with CMMC, because the sales, marketing, none of that is the same, as it used to be for us.
I might be a little proud dad here a little bit, but like, you crushed that. The way that you went through and took it. I mean, we didn't have anything. Like, I was just like, here's the challenge, figure it out, good luck. Because I've got this other giant mountain and other mountains I've got to climb. And that just is an example of having the right people in the right seats that you can give that responsibility to. And she crushed it. I mean, she worked on how we do the processes, created a CRM that's going to accept them. We had qualifying questions and all this stuff. All that needs to be defined. She came through and came up with ideas of like what a perfect avatar for our clients are going to be, how we would say no and how we would say yes.
Well,
just all of that.
It's kind of the same thing, the same idea of you didn't really have a map to follow, so you kind of made it up as you went because you didn't know of an MSP that was doing it like how you were, before doing CMMC in a scalable way. And then for me, I didn't really have a marketing agency that was like, oh yeah, we've been prepping CMMC for years. It was like, no, we don't know what that is. So it's, different perspectives. I would say yours was harder than mine, but definitely still mine was still important, because if you didn't have clients that were kind to you, you couldn't do the parts that you were preparing for. So
funny story. We were out eating. This is Kaleigh's here, so I'm not telling her anything she didn't know. We were down at a restaurant eating with some people at Seek West. And usually when I sit down, I'm used to people kind of picking my brain about how we did CMMC, because there's not many MSPs that have done it. And this other MSP was like, shh, be quiet, Bobby. Okay, Kaleigh, let's talk. Like, how did you do this from the marketing? How did you do that? It was so funny. I just sat there and ate my food. I was like, this is okay. Let's get it.
Okay. I want to talk about knowing how you will support your clients by handling the Four Horsemen. You've talked about this, I believe, in another episode. I think, who was it that gave you this idea? Ryan Bonner. That's right. So do you want to explain to people what you mean by the Four Horsemen and what that means for MSP? Okay.
So the Four Horsemen, and there's plus others, but it's going to be your vulnerability management, your application allow listing, your patching, and your AV. Like, how are you gonna do that? Right? Mm-hmm. So what approach are you going to use to accomplish those? There's lots of different ways you can do it. But again, when you start involving other cloud tools and things like that, it gets very interesting because you have to worry about whether introducing that causes a compliance issue. And then you have some additional ones like FIPS. How are you going to remote access the client? Right? Mm-hmm. So you've got to think about FIPS, because you coming in to support your client is absolutely remote access. So you're going to have to do that in a FIPS validated manner, not a compliant manner, but a validated manner. Two different things. One is not met and one is. Guess which one it is, right? And then you've got change management. How does the client do change management and how does it come to you? Mm-hmm. And then you got to think about your ticketing management, right? Of how you're going to handle and work and take that, and how they're going to create. Are they going to create tickets on their side and then kick them to you? Or are they going to use yours? There's no necessarily right or wrong way. It's just those are challenges you're going to have to figure out.
Absolutely. Can you explain just really quickly what change management is for somebody that might be stepping into the space that doesn't know exactly what?
Yeah. So typically you have to have a system that revolves around when you have your steady state of your environment and you have to make a change. What do you go through to authorize it, determine that the certain risks have been mitigated to it, right? So when they go to make a change, is it going to blow stuff up? You want to determine if documentation needs to change. Are certain stakeholders, do they need to be informed about these types of changes? Right. And then you get authorization to make that change. And then once it's done, you validate it's been applied correctly. An example would be you're going to add a printer. You're like, we add printers all the time. Exactly. That's why change management can be such a punch in the face, because you're like, well, it's just a printer. Well, yeah, but that printer could print CUI, right? And maybe that printer is a multifunction printer that has a hard drive in it that caches and stores whatever you're scanning. And just like, all these types of things start to come up that you really need to think about. So that's why when you make changes, does the printer going to be on your CUI network, or is it going to be in your out of scope network that you have? Because those networks should not be the same. They should be segmented and separated. So when you go to just add something, and you might think it's just arbitrary, it's not when you're dealing with a CMMC environment. That's why the change control process makes you kind of stop, collaborate and listen, a little bit, because you're back with a brand new invention. It's called CMMC and change management.
Yeah. I didn't love that.
Okay. You didn't like that?
No.
Okay.
It's okay, though.
You might need to edit it out, but
maybe
we'll go with it for now.
No, but I think that's so important to highlight, because coming from somebody who has personally gone through their company transitioning into this CMMC world and this, ecosystem and this compliance structure and the security structure, the change management is a huge evolution for your company. It definitely, if you haven't been doing it before, it can be a little bit of a culture shock. You're saying, whoa, I can't just do whatever I want whenever I want. I have to go through these processes. I think that's a great example of multiple things that are like that with CMMC.
Well, let's go a little deeper about that, since I don't know, we'll just take a little extra time, give you some bonus minutes here of detail. Who's authorized to do that inside your company? Like, have you thought about who's going to do it? Who's qualified to understand risk at the level that's needed to look at, right? Is that going to be your intern that just started? So you got to think about the processes of when that comes in. In your agreements, have you thought about what the response time should be for your SLA?
So true.
Right? A change management is not going to be the same as a ticket. Do not make that mistake, because change management is a much more mature process. It's not something you can just do quickly. Hey, we need to approve this app, get it installed yesterday. Like, that's cute. Thank you. But we got to think about this a little bit because we can't have you failing your assessment because, we went ahead and put Adobe Cloud in there. And, by the way, that Adobe Cloud has a sync program that's grabbing your CAD files and sending them all off to Adobe Cloud. And we didn't think about that. We just installed the app because you asked. Yeah. And then your auditor looks at that and goes, that's a cloud app. You do know that, right? And you're like, and you got a problem. Yeah. Right?
No, that's so true.
And also the auditor might not catch it, but maybe you might get caught in, some other situations because of the fact that you had perhaps an incident that happened in your environment and there was an investigation and it was discovered that you were out of compliance because you were doing things that weren't properly disclosed in your audit.
That's so true. So let's talk about the last thing that I wanted to mention is the maintenance piece and the scalability of that. This is so important because it's kind of like the last thing on the CMMC journey list, so maybe it's the last thing that you think about, but it's actually the thing that you're going to be doing most often, and right. Which is crazy to think about. And so you definitely have to consider and you must prepare for what happens when you finish the assessment and your clients are now, attesting to this once a year, and then in 3 years they have to do the assessment again. What are you doing for them? Right?
Yeah, it's kind of like track it here. Here we go.
No.
Here we go.
Everybody pull out a pen and paper.
It's like The Princess Bride.
No.
With Indigo, and he's been in the revenge business for so long that he wanted to get even with the six-fingered man, and he does. And then he's like, now what am I going to do with my rest of my life? But yeah, like you go through all of this effort fighting to get your level 2 and you pass, and you're like, cool, okay, we can just like throw all this to the side now. We don't have to worry about it for 3 years. No, like that is how you get a really good false claim and lose millions of dollars. No, you've got to maintain it. And as an MSP, you've got to think about how you're going to continually maintain it. Does that mean? That means you have to have a checklist. Things have to happen. Did you know that all your controls have to be reviewed at least once a year, right? Not just the controls themselves, but whether or not they are meeting the requirements of what you're trying to do. So you've got to go through and do an assessment. You've got to upload each year how well you're doing, right? So you've got to have a process to do that. And the list just keeps going on and on and on. So that maintenance piece is a huge deal. So you've got to really think about how you're going to keep those clients compliant. How are you going to talk with a C3PO if you're going to make a change, right? Have you thought about it? Are you going to talk to your C3PO because all of a sudden you were totally cloud, but now you're going to bring the location into scope? Is that going to require another audit?
Right.
Are you prepared to have that conversation with the C3PO about that? These are things that you really need to start thinking about in your maintenance journey. But if you spend, like kind of in that example, all your time on the revenge business, and then once you finally gotten there, you're like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And if you haven't factored that into your quoting, you could be in trouble. You might have front-ended all this package cost of what you did, but your maintenance is way out of proportion because you never really factored that in. And so your reoccurring revenue is nowhere adequate to cover your cost of supporting those clients because the burden is higher than what you expected.
It's such a great point. And I really hope you guys, as he's explaining this, you understand when Bobby is saying it's probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. We get a lot of comments. It's like, CMMC is not that hard. And it's like, okay, well, are you an MSP? Also, okay, OSCs have it really hard as well. So I don't know what you're talking about there. But doing it as an MSP is like doing it on hard mode because you have to think about all these extra things. And like what Bobby's saying here is even just the pricing and getting the pricing right. And it's like, spoiler alert, this just started this year for realsies, So if your MSP that you're working with says they have the perfect strategy and the perfect pricing package for that, they're liars because it's just started, And so this is just so important, I think, to talk about with even MSPs that are thinking about stepping into this space. Like, this is new for many people. We don't have every single answer right now, but we are going down this journey just like you guys are wanting to or thinking about doing it. It's very difficult, but it's also, in my opinion, super rewarding. But maybe we're just crazy. But yeah,
I think a little bit of both.
I think a little bit of both. So if you guys are listening to this and you are an MSP or an ESP, feel free to, comment if you have any questions or thoughts or whatnot. We do get a lot of people that, try to slide into our LinkedIn DMs or whatnot asking for personal meetings. But guys, we create these videos for you. This is what we would say in those meetings, okay? We're not lying to you. So take this as a personal meeting between us and you. This is what we would say to you. But if you have any specific questions, feel free to let us know in the comments. And then if you want specific videos in the future, make sure to put those in the comments as well. And tune in next Thursday for another episode. But until then, guys, keep on climbing. See ya. Make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube to stay up to date on the latest CMMC news. We hope you guys enjoyed today's episode and listen out for the next one. But until then, keep on climbing.